Hello, I'm Ashley Gregory. I'm going to be talking about hypertension versus African American. So today I'm going to be talking about hypertension and how it affects African American. I picked this topic because it's very interesting to me, and I guess when I was in my pathophysiology class and really learning about how, blood pressure, hypertension, and the kidneys all work together and how it affects, and the fact that, African Americans, how we're made in our makeup, our kidneys are prone to not flush out salt the way any other race is, and with that being said, it affects our blood pressure. And I feel like this is important to me because, for one, I am African American, young female. So this information also pertains to myself as well, and I feel like it's very important to know what necessary interventions needs to be done in order to keep myself healthy as well. And honestly, personally, it affects me because of the fact that my family is, I have a wide variety of my family members with the same illness or, condition. And nowadays you see a lot of it turning out to be, in the news you see more incidents of hypertension, and then hypertension, you know, goes to a broader condition that can turn into a chronic illness. So I feel like it's very important that a lot of African Americans know what's going on with their bodies and how to prevent it. So today we're going to be talking about interventions for hypertension in African Americans. So today I researched, I'm going to be talking about 6 articles. I just wanted to start off by giving you the titles, and within the rest of the presentation, everything will be up under Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, Article 6, but I did want to give you the titles just in case you want to go back and see what each one is in the title so you'll know what we're talking about. So the first article is going to be it's called Designing a Co-Created Intervention with African American Older Adults for Hypertension Self-Management. The second article is Community-Based Lifestyle Interventions in the Black Church, the Faith Trial. The third article is Impact of Pay for Performance Program on Care for Black Patients with Hypertension, Important Answers in the Era of the Affordable Care Act. Article 4, The Effect of Education plus Access on Perceived Fruit and Vegetable Consumption in the Rural African American Community, Intervention. The fifth article is Qualitative Systemic Review of Barber Administration, Health Education Promotion, Screening, and Outreach Programs in African American Communities. And the sixth article is Patient Education and Follow-up as an Intervention for Hypertensive Patients Discharged from an Emergency Department, a randomized controlled trial study protocol. So with Article 1, the research question was co-creating an intervention for hypertension self-management. Article 2 talked about to determine the effectiveness of therapeutic lifestyle, or what they call TLC, with motivational interviewing delivered in an influential institution in Black communities, the church, compared to health education. Article 3, evaluate the effect of pay for performance intervention on the quality of hypertension care provided by the Black patients and determine whether it produced risk selection. Article 4, the effects of the community-wide intervention addressing nutrition education plus food access. Article 5 evaluates the potential for barber-administered health education and outreach to reach Black men and promote positive health behaviors to address these persistent health disparities. And Article 6 talked about determining whether using interactive patient education delivered through health information technology as emergency department, enhanced discharge with subsequent education sessions at a clinic is an effective strategy for achieving short-term patient management of blood pressure. Theoretical framework. When it came to theoretical framework, none of the 6 articles really had any theoretical frameworks that they referred to. Designs and methodology. Article 1 pretty much took a sample of older adults within the range of 60 years or older. And with this, they had hypertension. And what they did, it was a participant-based co-created intervention. And they pretty much had a focus group. And the participants, or the older adults, really it was patient-based, if you want to say, a patient-centered. So they kind of paved how they wanted to do it. I'll go in more detail as we get further in how they did it. Article 2 pretty much took almost 400 patients from 32 New York churches, and with that, they had it where health education groups were compared to those that received. So you had some of the churches receive just health education, and then you had some receive the therapeutic lifestyle changes, which is the motivational interviewing process. Also, Article 3 did a randomized control trial, and this it was a randomized control trial, and you had about 3 types of financial incentives. And with that, it compared the physicians' Black patients meeting their hypertension performance needs, and they compared that to their final performance needs. And so with that, they assessed the following risks: switching providers, patient visit frequency, and panel turnover. Article 4 was a cross-sectional survey to identify the effects of men on the move, growing communities, and that's the little slogan that they use. And those are the people that provided the strategies for this whole research in this article. And what they did, they tried to identify the effects of this community pretty much on blood pressure, self-reported BMI, perceived fruit and vegetable consumption, and exposure to individual level and environmental level components of the intervention. Article 5 utilizes inclusion criteria, and what they did, they went through articles and a lot of research, and they found the best and the most feasible barbers. And with that, they used 6 barbershops were used for surveys and ethnographic research. But with that, the barbers were not pretty much involved. And then you had 2 barbershops where they protest education materials for African American audience, and then 4 of the barbershops that they used where the health professionals were actually present and services were delivered. And then you had your control, which were the barbershops were not involved. Article 6, I'll go back to Article 5. With that, I said that so wrong. For the 4 that used the barbershops as the sites where health professionals were delivering the service, I meant to say the barbers were not involved with this as well. Article 6 was pretty much taking this new little invention that they have, where it's called the achieving blood pressure control through enhanced discharge, or achieve BP, and it's where they it's a patient education intervention, and it pretty much takes it's that patient education for patients, and they did it for about 180 days. And with that, after that 180 days, they did various follow-ups. So at your 7-day, your 30-day, your 90-day, and then at your 180-day. And this was a way to provide that patient education about hypertension and how to control hypertension. Results. Okay, for Article 1, pretty much the results are as follows. So the following participants agreed upon doing this focus group. Like I said, it was a participant guided, and they pretty much decided on their number of sessions they would have, the type of experts they wanted, how long the sessions would be, and the number of sessions. And also with this, as the results were shown, being that they did all this, and they pretty much, it was patient based, and they centered everything around what they wanted to do. What it was found, it found like the primary stressors that were found, that they seen, that were the primary factors of why they couldn't, control their hypertension and use those self-care management skills. And with this, pretty much, they just took a survey, and with that survey, it they were able to determine the appropriateness and the cultural relevance with this. And pretty much everybody agreed that the appropriateness for this was an 8 out of 10, and the cultural relevance was an 8 out of 10 as well. For Article 2, with being that with this article, pretty much they did a 3-month, a 6-month, and a 9-month. With the 3-month, they didn't really see much of a change, but when it came to the 6-month, they realized that both groups showed a significant reduction in the systolic and diastolic blood pressure, but the most significance was shown with the group that used the therapeutic lifestyle changes. Also at the 9-month, both groups showed a significant reduction as well, and also they showed improvement with blood pressure control. Article 3, those patients that achieved the blood pressure control or received an appropriate response to their uncontrolled blood pressure in the final period was about 6.3%, which was 95% confidence interval. And what they did, they showed a greater, they had that 6.3% greater for physicians who received an incentive than for the controls. And with their controls, the controls didn't receive any incentives. So what it was showing, that they seen those that received those incentives, whether it was via physician or the participants, they showed that they had a greater percentage of like blood pressure control. But they did note that there was no difference between intervention and controls in the proportion of patients who switched providers. So those risks that I was talking about in the beginning, they didn't really see much of a difference between those. Results continue. Article 4, pretty much those who participated in the nutrition education and also had access to that fruit and vegetable community garden showed that they had a higher they showed a higher percentage of effectiveness, but the strongest effect was those on perceived fruit and vegetable consumptions occurred with higher participation in nutrition, education, and access. But those with excess but without the education had a reduced likelihood of consuming recommended servings of fruits and vegetables. But education plus access interventions may be best at increasing consumption of fruit and vegetables in the rural African American population. With Article 5, the results pretty much showed that barbers, especially with this article, it pretty much really focused on the male population. And with this, it really showed that barbers could have an effective impact with their customers. And also it showed that 8.8% absolute group difference between intervention and the control groups. And then they also noticed that if you involve like the barbers, it was so cost effective. Like that was one thing that the article really talked about, how cost effective it was. With Article 6, you have African American adults indicated that breathe health education sessions delivered by a touchscreen kiosk with the attached blood pressure monitor resulted in overall change in blood pressure that was statistically significant. In this feasibility, in this study, with a 3-month follow-up, 8 out of the 25 participants had their uncontrolled blood pressure under control. So that goes to show that a good bit of those participants really showed increase in their blood pressure control. Limitations with Article 1, the limitation was really because they had a larger sample, it ruled out those that didn't speak in the focus group. Also, the male to female ratio really reduced the male response, so you had more female based responses versus the males. So that was another limitation with Article 1. With Article 2, you had the researchers didn't really include the evaluation of the therapeutic lifestyle change characteristics, and also with this research, they should have tracked. Also, it was saying they should have tracked, medication changes. So, since you might have had, being that they're on this new lifestyle change, they probably could have changed their medications or went to their provider and stopped taking their medications, anything like that. It didn't really consider that. In Article 3, it was unable to test varying incentives. Also, the unknown generability to settings over the VA in conditions other than hypertension were not really taken into consideration. With Article 4, it was being that it was a cross-sectional survey, it didn't provide much casualty. Also, measurement bias and bias towards socially active and mobile residents kind of played a limitation in this article. With Article 5, dealing with the barbers, one thing that it said was the barbers are very busy professionals, which is true. If you're pretty well known, you're going to have a lot of business. So a lot of them were limited to the amount of service they could provide because, they were busy doing their normal day-to-day business activity. And then also another limitation that it discussed was that being that they only targeted the barber customers, so that did kind of provide some limitation as well. With Article 6, it really didn't have any limitations, but the article did discuss how effective this intervention was. Recommendation for future research by authors. So with Article 1, according to the participants, increasing the number of sessions, providing more healthy ethnic recipes, and also the age, because though you were doing a lot of the older ones, sometimes they were mentioning how though you want older ones, what about the older ones that actually could be, that have kids, that probably could have been a great role model for the kids in eating healthier and, being aware of those risk factors and those health factors. Also, another thing that they said was involving a group for men and incorporating like family components with this type of research. With Article 2, really just considering the medication adjustments, like I mentioned earlier, how they could, possibly change medications, everything like that. With Article 3, it's more so determining the effects of pay for performance programs on health disparities between blacks and other groups, and for other clinical conditions and settings of healthcare. With Article 4, they really mainly just talked about enhancing like the validity and the reliability. With Article 5, it recommended that increase the evidence for effectiveness of their participation in health intervention programs or their training needs. And with Article 6, it was really just increasing the research involving the effectiveness of the interaction between the patient education modules as part of the emergency department discharge process. And then the recommendation for future research in this area, really channeling more age groups, because I know me being a college student and our young minds think that we can't get it because we're not old. The whole saying about you have to be old to get hypertension, but that's really not true. You can get hypertension at an early age, and I feel like we need to channeling more into groups, and I seen that was one thing, just channeling into more groups, and also education and evidence-based and education are like the two main things, really just, and those two things will really help keep the awareness alive and also keep the awareness out there, so everyone, not even just African Americans, but everyone will know. Discussion, let's wrap it up. So pretty much with with the 6 articles, I realized that when you have patient education and having the proper resources available is what really helps, get the attention of African Americans. And I feel like, though we talked about the barbers, I feel as though that's a great incentive, but like it said, a lot of the barbers, they're working on their own business, so it's kind of hard for them to incorporate something that they're not really, they really don't have much education on themselves. So I would say really patient education, letting patients know, letting African Americans know their chemical makeup. I feel as though as an African American, you should know that your kidneys are made a certain way and your body is not able to dispel this salt the same way as other races. So I feel as though that education is very important, so that African Americans can know what's going on with their bodies and how to prevent it. And I feel as though if you have that, that will really lower the rate and the incidence of so many people and so many African Americans diagnosed with hypertension and later leading to chronic illnesses. What I really learned from this was, the importance of, your health. Also, really being that, I'm in nursing, like, though I'm not a RN per se, and yet being that I do know, this is something I feel as though I should make aware to my family, and I've, by doing this research, it gave me a lot of insight that I can help and, bring to the table to my own family and then, near and far, so that they are, and so that they know how to keep themselves healthy and, get on a healthier track and, save themselves from chronic illnesses, diseases, or anything in that nature. If you have any more questions, just let me know. Here are my references. The end.